Welcome to Creative Visionaries, Real Designers, Creating Real Solutions. This is going to be an awesome panel. I can't wait to dive into a lot of topics with our panelists. So here's how we're going to run this. We've got about an hour or so to dive deep into a few topics. And we're going to hear from these guys and all of their experience. And then we're going to have about 25 minutes or so afterward to open it up to you, unless you have questions that you want to just dive in. I mean, we're an intimate, small group here, but we do have time toward the end for audience Q&A. So that'll be a great time for you to bring in some of your questions. I want to introduce you to everyone. I'll start by introducing myself. My name's Heather Allen Zucchino. I teach a class here for the College of Design called The Business of Design. And it's important for students to be able to engage with and interact with real designers and find out what happens after college, what are some of the opportunities available, and really get those wheels turning outside of the textbooks. So to my immediate left, we have Steve McCullough, founder and managing partner of Winnow Creative. If you will just raise your hand and say hi as we move down. Followed by Betty Cogdell, founder and CEO of Simply Be Gluten Free. Adam Nelson, senior user experience designer and product manager at MedFusion. Adam's also a graduate of NC State College of Design. Then we have Justin Miller, CEO and co-founder of DejaMe and WebPix apps. He's also an NC State College of Design alum. Matt Tomasulo, civic designer, founder of City Fabric and Walk Your City. Also a College of Design grad. We have Todd Coates, Chief Creative Officer at Capstrat, and Lenny Terenzi, Creative Director at Hey Monkey Design and Print. Hey guys, welcome.
Hello. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so to get us started, a lot of our panelists have created solutions, design solutions on their own terms. I want to start us off by asking some of the entrepreneurial designers here, Justin, Steve, Matt, Betty, and Lenny, and I'd love to start with Justin and go in that order. What are some of the questions and problems you're solving for? What are the problems that you are solving for through design? And if you want to tell us a little bit about what you do in answering that, that would be great.
Yeah, so I have an app that I co-founded with a group of mainly guys in downtown Raleigh for weddings. Sort of an unusual market that we found ourselves in, but it was a concept that derived originally around concerts, with the premise being you have a concert, you usually have hundreds if not thousands of people that are actively taking their own candid content and thinking about a way to aggregate or collect all of that after the fact without people needing to be socially tied to one another. The idea was originally conceived in 2010, so this was sort of pre-hashtag days. And we brought it to market, ran it for about 18 months and realized that concerts weren't something that worked because at the end of the day, people didn't really care that much about that. And we wound up moving into weddings, which was a space that made a ton of sense. You have a group on average of, say, 120 people. You have lots of people taking their own photos and videos, and this was a very simple solution that enabled the couple and all of the guests to collaboratively share, experience, and relive that whole wedding experience through content, or through that candid content. From a design standpoint, the challenge for us was figuring out how to build something that would resonate with a market that we knew nothing about. And so first and foremost, we were looking at other applications, thinking that brides-to-be, who would be our target audience, what were other applications that they would actively be using? Things like Facebook and Pinterest and Instagram. And knowing that if we had any chance whatsoever to break into this new market, we had to design something from a UI and a UX standpoint that felt like something that they were used to using, that resonated with them. So at the first point, when they would download WebPix and log into an account, it felt very familiar to them. So we did some pretty in-depth studies early on myself and one of my other co-founders are both graduates from the design school in graphic design, so we had that background. And I would attribute a lot of our early success to the fact that we were very design focused and we knew how to create something very elegant but very simple to use. And also, I think the fact that we were a lot of guys trying to tackle product in a space that was primarily women, a lot of people have looked at WedPix and have looked at the overall platform that we've built and have said that it doesn't feel very wedding. It's not pink and lacy and flowy, but it's much more rigid and tech looking. That has served to benefit us because it enables us to stand out so much in this space where everything has this sort of same look as a whole. So design, we really relied heavily on design, especially in our early days, because of the fact that we were entering into a space that we really knew nothing about.
Awesome. How about you, Steve?
Well, I've, what we at Winnow Creative really kind of dive into each firm that we deal with. Our space really is professional service firms, and we kind of go into each firm, and typically these firms are looking to, they've been established, they've been in business for a long period of time, and they need a refresh, they need a rebrand or a different way to go. And so we kind of go in and tackle each one uniquely. Obviously, we want to find out really what they're about, what their brand is, what's going to be the design solution. So we do so much more dive in research into really, what's their culture, what's their makeup, what have they done, what is their history, and what does that have to be for the next future generation? Because so much of this is tied to, even succession. I get calls all the time. It's like, well, we've been doing this for a long period of time. So we really dive into each one. And so the solution can really generate something that's totally different for them because they really want to move to a different space or they want to refine their space. They're doing too many things. We really, kind of narrow what they're supposed to be doing or what they really want to be doing. So it may take a completely different design technique to do that, or it may be something that they've been utilizing for some period of time, and it's just kind of putting a fresh look on that because there's brand, there's that ability to keep that recognition within the marketplace. It's very important to them. So each client that we dive into for that professional service is really different.
And who are some of your clients, just so we have an idea?
So we do a lot of work for architects, engineers. One that we just finished recently, J. Davis Architects. We do a lot of work for Campbell University. They're a well-established school that just moved. When they moved to Raleigh, we kind of help them get branded and rebranded here in Raleigh with a new look, and that's kind of carried on into some other schools that they have down in Bowie's Creek. We also do some work for UNC and some for St. Mary's School that we just picked up. So.
Matt, how about you? You've got a completely different design approach and design field, so tell us what kind of problems you're solving for through design.
So I guess I headed in the direction of design a little bit later in life, not that much later, but I didn't know what design was when I was an undergrad student. I had a fundamentals of design course at my liberal arts undergraduate school and realized that there was this whole language and approach that I was grasping for when I was in high school and in college, being interested in art and creativity, but didn't really have the vocabulary to address it. And so when I had that class, I realized that there was this whole world out there. And so I kind of went off curriculum, which was business, and went overseas to study architecture in Copenhagen, Denmark. And there I kind of fell in love with not designing buildings, but understanding and influencing the space between buildings. And that's what led me to NC State and UNC for landscape architecture and city and regional planning. And it was really at the College of Design that I started to understand this more iterative, design process of test, iterate, learn, and improve that also is used very much in the tech world as well. And so, not constraining yourself to bad ideas or to things that might seem wild or outlandish. And it was really kind of this interdisciplinary approach that I got very interested in about how to shape public space. And so that's dealing with social, economic, environmental triggers, tools, policies, and ultimately in school, I was a little bit more interested in the community than in what was actually happening than maybe what was happening in the classroom, and just started to tinker and test and iterate. Say I was doing a research project. I don't care what's happening in California. I want to test it here in Raleigh. And so Walk Your City, which is my full-time job now, which is basically street signs for people. It's making street signs for people accessible for communities around the globe via technology. It's really simple. But kind of fell into that based off of a little design project that I was doing in school that was based on showing people that it wasn't too far to access things in their immediate vicinity on foot. It was really basic, but what it did is it took a lot of pieces from other communication systems like the highway system, and it kind of reorganized it to address people. And so I was working on a research project at UNC, and the research project was the perceived barriers to people not walking walkable distances. And the overwhelming reason was the perception that it was too far. And so that for walkable distances was anything 20 minutes or less. And so I started asking my neighbors. I lived near Cameron Village. Do you walk to Harris Teeter? It's like less than 15 minutes. They said no. And I said, well, would you walk if it was 14 minutes? He said, yeah. I go, well, it's 13. And so that happened again and again. And then I started to see my neighbors, on a Saturday with their kids walk to the grocery store. And so that a few light bulbs went off, and I was like, how could we show other people in Raleigh that this is an option? And from previous experience living these other places, drawing from these other experiences and understanding that, more people now live in cities than ever have before, and in the U.S. people are flocking back to them, we have to learn how to better fit closer together, live closer together, and to do that, we need to walk and bike and take the bus in addition to driving. And so by taking this design approach, reorganize a sign that actually is built on the same construct as highway signs. One's up there on the left, and but it's designed for the human scale. So it's only 12 inches by 12 inches. It's not 12 feet by 12 feet. We attached them to existing infrastructure with zip ties. We didn't want to be malicious. Wanted to be able to remove it quickly. It's conversational versus a little bit more informational. The minutes versus miles is a human scale metric versus an automobile scale metric. And then we tied a little bit of tech, having the QR code on there. We could track and measure the performance, have a little bit of data to back up what we were doing, which ultimately helped it grow. And design the whole experience for people to respond to it. So we wanted to make it very accessible for people to respond, to say if they like it or not. And that ultimately is what helped it really, really blow up around the country, is that, and in the world, is that we made it accessible and tangible and digestible for people to do it on their own. And that's what got the attention of BBC and all these other crazy news outlets that helped propel its momentum. And the fact that we were very open and transparent about it and how we did it, I think resonated well. And so much of our growth from then has really been this testing, iterating, learning, and growing process, which I'm sure that you guys do on a daily basis. And I think that for me, that's really what the design process is always continually analyzing and looking at things in different ways and testing things and being able to build a system where you can test things to see what might work and what might not work. So.
Awesome, Matt. Thanks. Betty, you might not consider yourself to be a designer. You'll have to tell us. But what problem are you solving for, and what solution have you come up with for it?
So I manufacture gluten-free, dairy-free baking mixes particularly for grocery stores. And I started this because I was diagnosed gluten and dairy intolerant as a college student at Carolina. And this started out as a class project and inevitably turned into a business. And so you think when you're making a product that if it's good, people are going to buy it, but that's not always the case. And so I really had to sit down and focus on what's going to make the customer pick it up off the shelf at, say, Whole Foods Market. So this is actually the third iteration of packaging. We used to be Betty's Better Breads, and we used to be fresh baked products. And it was very basic packaging. I was an undergrad student and just bootstrapping it. And then when we moved to baking mixes, we started out in pouches, but it still looked very like, it didn't look high end, it didn't grab people's attention, it didn't stand out. And so actually this project, I worked with Lenny over here with Hey Monkey Design over in Durham, and this summer we really designed these boxes together. And the direction that I wanted to go was I wanted it to be happy, because when you're diagnosed, gluten and dairy intolerant, it's not happy. It's not very positive. And a lot of the people that are being diagnosed are kids. And these mothers that are having to find products for their kids to eat want something that's friendly and inviting and something that their kids will be excited to partake in. And being that it's a baking mix, I knew as a child I loved using an easy bake oven, and I loved making cookies and cakes in the kitchen with my mom, and I couldn't imagine being gluten intolerant as an 8-year-old girl not being able to get in the kitchen and make cupcakes. So I wanted it something friendly and fun, so it kind of hops along, and this was all Lenny's creation, and it hops along so they can follow along. And I found that this design really stands out on the shelf. It looks like nothing else out there. It's bright. A lot of the other products out there, when we were doing the research, and of course I, had been living this for 5 years, so I knew a lot of the other companies. They have very sterile packaging, and it's very just like dry and not humanistic or much character to it. And so this is just something completely different, and I find that our customers really love it. And it sells out of Whole Foods every time we stock it on the shelves. And we're now being expanded to more Whole Foods because they love the packaging. And it seems that while the product has always been the same, as the design work has progressed and become better and more focused on our clients and what we believe drives them to pick it up off the shelves, I find it's really promoting the growth of the company more than anything else that we've done before. And so while I'm not per se a designer, I find that design is very intricately connected to the success of a business, because that's how people perceive it and see you. And while if it was in a gray box with nothing exciting on it, but it has a block of gold in it, that doesn't matter, because people don't see that, what's inside. They don't see the product until they pick it up off the shelf, take it home, and make it. So that's my experience with design, and now on to Lenny.
Awesome. Yeah, it's really cool that Lenny, one of your clients, is here. So who are some of your other clients? What problems are you solving for through design, and how do you do that?
So I'm the quintessential one-person shop. I even say it on my website in the footer, just a one-man shop, keeping it simple. A couple years ago, when I really decided to really stake out on my own, I used to do a lot of work with agencies. I did some work with French West Vaughn and some other agencies, and decided I want to work for myself, full-time. I have two overriding things. Number one, I want to work with my clients, not for. And Betty even said that right off the bat. I worked with Hey Monkey Design, and we had conversation after conversation. It was really a collaborative thing. Never once did I feel like I was a pixel pusher or a design monkey or whatever. design monkey, no pun intended. And then ultimately, I just want to make stuff that looks cool and is fun. I just want to have fun designing it. That's my sole goal in life, is to have fun. If I'm having fun, it's going to be easy for me. It's going to be fun for me. It's going to be easier for the client. It's going to be fun for the client. All that other stuff, and it's not to play it down. You know, we're going to hit all the design goals. We're going to make sure it stands out on this. We're going to do all that stuff. Have fun, and and just make it look good is kind of my thing.
Awesome, great. Let's bring Todd and Adam into the conversation. So you guys have a little bit of a different perspective because you're working within organizations. So what kind of problems are you solving for through your role, and how does that impact the organization and your clients? Todd, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I grew up as a designer and started managing people, which the better you get at something, the less you do of it, evidently. So I don't design much anymore. So we have a team of folks, and I look at my role as getting the circumstances right so they can be as successful and do the best work possible. And that's kind of squishy, but what that means is using creativity and design thinking, which we just correlate to strategy. That's all it is, to negotiate difficult client challenges and difficult processes and just difficult employee relationships and things like that. It's just, you could just apply it to every situation. So my role is to make sure that I get the landscape right for other people to do the best thing they can do.
Awesome, cool. And that's through your role as creative officer. And what kind of, do you work directly with clients?
I do.
And then also create design solutions within your organization?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
Same process?
No, it varies. Obviously, it depends. Well, a basic process that everyone's mentioned, where it's research and then rapid iteration. But working with clients is just it's more personalized, it's more customized than ever. We look more like a commercial creative firm, which means to some people we look like an ad agency, to some people we look like a digital firm, to some people we look like a public relations firm. It just really depends. The reason why is we mix all those together. To us, it doesn't matter the channels that the message comes through. It has to. We don't sit down and go, I think I will receive some advertising through TV today, or I think I will look at Facebook. So we just blend all of that together. So it takes kind of an orchestration of making sure all those messages are hitting the right people at the right time.
Awesome, thank you. And so Adam, user experience design, how does that impact your organization, and what kind of clients do you guys work with?
So user experience design is kind of a nebulous term still, but it is, for me, it's graphic design combined with testing and with a lot of reading on like Nielsen Norman Group and that kind of thing about how people actually interact with your products. So we do a whole suite of medical products that are focused on the consumer. So your doctor's office will have a patient portal, payment app, health records app, and a couple of other different things. And our goal is to build that experience for the consumer and specifically focused on them versus actually the people that pay us, which are the doctor's offices, because it's more important to get engagement than it is necessarily to satisfy the people that are actually the stakeholders, which is kind of a counterintuitive concept, but it's actually where their best interests are. As a small mom and pop doctor's office, they are driven to get engagement from their consumers by the government and by reimbursement and these kinds of things, and also by outcomes. So if they have a more consistent connection with their patients, then they can manage them better. They can be more in touch with them. They may hear about something that they otherwise wouldn't have heard about, and they can reach back out. So my job is to be the kind of point person in the organization for figuring out how best to guide the development of the products to actually make those things happen. So It's a lot of visual design, it's a lot of wireframing, a lot of testing, and a lot of meetings ahead of time, particularly with business people who are already set on the kind of direction they want to go with the product and trying to unpack exactly why they've decided they want to do what they want to do. And, it's the design thinking process, basically. It's what's the actual problem, not what have you decided the problem already is. And trying to walk it back, work through those things, and then go in the right direction to really build something great.
Awesome. Cool. So now that we have an idea of where everyone's coming from, I want to ask you guys to think about some anecdotes or stories in which your brand has created meaning for others, whether it be your clients, the end user, the end consumer, an experience where you found that what you've created goes out of your studio, out of your office, and actually becomes very meaningful and creates a lot of impact in someone else's life. Anybody, dive in.
All right, I'll jump in on it. So my brand specifically, Hey Monkey, so I said I'm a one-man shop, and a lot of people are their name graphic designer. I never liked the sound of my name with like a title like that, like graphic designer or design shop. And so I named my company after my daughter right there. When she was born, the first 2 words I ever said to her were, "Hey, monkey." And so when I really set out to want to do, a design shop, I figured what's the best way, something that's very personal to me. So I went with that. And it's definitely been a conversation point, in terms of how like people react. So it's always a conversation starter. Why do you call yourself that? And it's I think it's a story that lets people know that I'm open, to communicate. I'm open emotionally, which, when you're designing a brand or you're working with a client who's trying to start a new company or tackle an extremely difficult personal problem with their product, it kind of already breaks down some of those walls. They feel like they can like approach me, they can talk to me. So that's, a lot of where that's helped for me. And also, it's kind of allowed me to, one of the things I've been focusing on this year is actually creating a brand out of my brand. So I'm just getting ready to launch Monkey Wrench Manufacturing Company, which is honestly just a little fun side brand of me making t-shirts and just things for me to kind of creatively have fun with, to put out there. So like by creating this brand and detaching my own name and my own self for it, I can kind of have me as my own client, which is always a lot of fun because I don't tell myself no, ever. I could just do it and be like, well, that doesn't work. Well, I don't care. It looks good. So I can have fun with myself as a client and be able to put stuff out there. So I think it's just, for me, it's been having fun creating a brand out of myself. That may sound silly, but
As the client and the designer.
as a client and the designer, and just really kind of having fun with that.
Other experiences where your brand has really taken on meaning that you haven't necessarily prepared for or expected.
So when we first set out with WedPix, we sort of had this idea that the application would be used as a replacement for the disposable camera at the reception was the most obvious use case for it, sort of the problem solution. And not really knowing much about the market, that was all that we thought about was this small window, and thinking, this is just, it's a party, people at the party are taking pictures, and this is just an easy way to collect those pictures. Where it really started to resonate that this was about something bigger was very early on, we would have our users, primarily brides, write back to us and tell us how by using WedPix, they were able to share the experience of the wedding with people, maybe family members who were too old to travel or people who couldn't make it to the wedding, people who couldn't afford the several $1,000 wedding photographer and instead used this as an alternative solution. So we realized that we knew we were tapping into an emotional market by default, but we realized that this was about something much larger. And even the use case of what people were doing with it, we set out for this one specific, say, 4-hour window, but people were using it to capture and share their entire wedding experience, so from early engagement well through the honeymoon and thereafter. So it was very interesting just watching how the consumer took the product that we had designed and just through their own emotional attachment, if you will, broaden the overall usage of this application, and hearing on a weekly basis just how it impacted them in such a big way. You know, we're just thinking that we created this cool thing that had an easy problem solution, and hearing people write app reviews that say that, you know, this changed their entire wedding experience is really it's powerful, and I would say it's also very motivational for us to keep bettering the product and thinking about new ways that we can build on existing relationships and build new relationships with brides to be, you know, each year as the next wedding season comes up. So.
Go ahead.
So the kind of my main focus, even though I guess I do have some side projects, is again Walk Your City, which, you know, very simply is kind of like temporary signs that are made out of plastic, and it's been kind of wild to think that I could grow a team, or that a business in general, a team that works full time to provide this for communities could ever actually happen. But it's more so kind of what that's led to, where not only do you see the signs start to become a symbol in these communities, where people do it themselves. You know, it pretty much started out as community members, take pictures, share it with us not seeking that out, hundreds from around the world sharing their projects with us, then ultimately led to us being able to work directly with municipalities, with healthcare providers, and it became an actual tool to shift approach and culture, you know, within the establishment, which has been pretty interesting and quite the learning experience. And so, being able to work with large institutions with this simple, you know, tool as a way to manage change, to manage new ways of addressing concerns and needs of urbanizing environments. It's been pretty wild to see that this, I always say this silly, stupid little sign thing, you know, but it has, because it does have this framework, it's accessible, and it has resonated with a lot of people. It's become more of this kind of symbol for folks to rally around this ideal that they have for their community. And the fact that that can kind of go from neighborhood, individual citizen level up to, you know, really opaque, heavy organizations like Blue Cross is pretty interesting. So.
That's great. Yeah. I have a little emotional tag for your Walk Your City. So I'm part of AIGA Raleigh, which I might get to talk about later, you know, local creative community. And we went to Grand Rapids, Michigan last summer for a conference. And when we got there, you know, none of us have been there before. And lo and behold, we walk outside our hotel, and there were Walk Your City signs, and we immediately felt like we were home and that we could get everywhere. And we actually were able to even pull it into our presentation because we are the host city for that same conference this coming year. And so we were able to say, see these things? That's at home. That's what's created at home. So we were able to, you know, just at a very base emotional level, like we got to this strange city, and within minutes, we were like, oh, Matt's here. We're good. We're cool. We can get around. So I just wanted to throw that in.
Cool. Thanks. No, that's great. Yeah.
Right away.
That's great.
We were fortunate enough to work with the Health and Wellness Trust Fund for 9-10 years. These are the folks that were awarded the tobacco settlement years ago. And the agreement, the legal agreement was it had to be used in North Carolina for education and reduction of smoking to teenagers. So if you start thinking about the complexities of this problem, at the time, North Carolina had much higher than average smoking rates, given, I mean, we're a tobacco state. You know, our heritage was agricultural, and they grew tobacco. So you can't really talk about that because you're slamming, you know, somebody's grandpa. Secondly, you can't talk about how bad tobacco companies are because that's illegal in this particular particular settlement. Thirdly, we're talking to 12 to 17-year-olds, which, as you guys know, listen to everything that you tell them, particularly if it comes, yeah, right, particularly if it comes, from, the man, right? So, this really was a great integrated campaign it was a combination. It was as much policy as it was advertising, as it was grassroots coalition building. And it was wonderful to see our state come together. And it became a movement over time when it started to become cool to not smoke. And high school students started forming these groups and recruiting more high school students. So, long story short, when we ended our relationship because the present administration canceled the funding for that, we had research that showed that we had prevented 54,000 North Carolina teens from starting to smoke. So we have the first generation who are smoking less than their parents in North Carolina. So the brand was Tobacco Reality Unfiltered. I left out the major part of the story there. Sorry, but that was part of the movement, was that they got their brand name out.
Wow.
So branding is an important topic, obviously, for the College of Design, for my class. And I know that everyone on this panel is totally biased, but there are a lot of different ways of communicating a brand and a message, advertising, PR, written copy in general. How important is that visual identity of a brand as an influencer?
I think that the visual identity, all of it has to work together. When we work with a client, we really look at, what is the message? What are the differentiators? It's the typical jargon, but what sets you apart? What makes you important, in your marketplace and sets you apart from your competitor? But the visual identity really is that first impression. And so many times, our clients come to us and it's like, we feel like our brand is tired. We need a new look, or we need something fresh. And it's people attribute the brand to the visual. It's not necessarily all of that. It's obviously not all of that. The brand is the culture. It's the messaging. It's the visual. But the visual is the thing that you see the first, and it's first impression. So it's a huge thing that you've got to get that right, and it's got to be memorable. It can't just be a regular icon that you've seen it somewhere else and it doesn't make any sense. It has to be memorable to what that particular message, or brand or company or whatever it is. It has to resonate and be memorable.
I'll piggyback off of that. I'll say that we, as a brand, actually failed in a lot of places. Even today, looking at what we did with the logo that you can see up there, the name itself, even though people think WedPix is very obvious, people often say web pics, people say wedding pics. People look at the logo and think we do pics and think that we're photographers. So we had some challenges early on with that. We were trying to come up with a name that would be very obvious as to what it was, like WedPix was wedding pics. People got that, but then people would refer to us as the latter. So we really went much heavier on the identity versus the actual brand itself. I would almost say...
What do you mean by that? Identity?
So I would say it's very much in parallel with what Betty showed here, where somebody may not necessarily know that this is what Simply Be gluten-free is, but they recognize this packaging and the overall look and feel, and that resonates with this particular company. For us, in looking at our presence on social media, and that people think of WedPix as not only this application for a wedding, but also a place on, say, Facebook, where hundreds of thousands of brides go to every day to look at wedding inspiration and DIY ideas and things that are all in a photo or a picture format. So I would say that we failed in the actual brand itself, which is unfortunate because 2 out of the 3 co-founders of this company have design backgrounds and have many years of doing this. We felt that we nailed it in the beginning, but then we saw all of these issues arise from it. But I will say where we really succeeded was in building up the identity of the company around what the name of the company. So the name is almost like the secondary part, but people associate wedding tech with wed pics and associate inspirational ideas online with our social channels. So I think it sort of goes back and forth, but it's a good example of both a success and a failure within one company.
I think that brings up, it's a really interesting question. We spend a significant amount of time talking about brand strategy and all of those things. Brand, put any word at the end of it, and we'll do that. But what we feel like it really comes down to, it's a promise that you got to keep. And that's an experience that if you have a retail outlet, that experience has to be consistent, memorable as the identity, memorable as the packaging. It's how you tweet stuff out. It's every single thing. It's the way you breathe as an organization. So when we're working with organizations and corporations, and we are doing brand strategy, we really try to define every single thing that we possibly can that is a touch point for their audiences, because it has to be something that I don't even look at it anymore. Like I don't read it. It just becomes a thing, and I know I like that. That makes me happy. That makes me feel smart. If I wear Nikes, that makes me feel like I could run. So it's really bigger. It's like that orb in Guardians of the Galaxy, when it's like opened up and all that crap shoots out of it. It's like that in reverse. You got to pack all that into a little thing.
Yeah, I think that brings up a really good point in that branding is really a feeling that you're invoking in your consumer, and that it needs to be, as you said, where they're not even reading the package or reading the app, or they visualize it, they see it, something jumps out to them that they remember from the last time they saw it, and it invokes a feeling in them that makes them want to experience it again. So that's kind of what I went for with my packaging. I kind of had a failure in the name as well. Well, first off, it was Betty's Better Breads, and Betty Crocker had a problem with that. Secondly,
Compliment.
Simply B, people don't know how to spell it. They want to put an E or EE, and I just wanted it to be B as in Betty. But people recognize the packaging now, and then they see the name, and they have that happy feeling when they see it. Their kids want it. I get pictures and comments all the time about how, the kids just love making it, love eating it. And when they see it on the shelves, they might not even be able to read, but they know the colors, they know the layout, they know that that's what they want. And so that's really what my focus was. And then people, then are like, oh, Simply B, yeah, that's what we like, and they like the name because they're like, oh yeah, it's so hard to be gluten-free, it's making it simpler and better, and so the branding, to me, is a feeling that you're creating for the customer through your platform.
To almost like put a word or two to this, because I think piggybacking on the last 3, it's like, I think identity like almost builds serious trust with like a consumer or someone who engages with it, and I think along with building trust, it also shows competency. For me, it's it really shows that you care about what you do, and so I can build more trust to then dive into actually what you do. And so for me, it's like it's so interesting to be, like I reflect on the way I feel when I interact with different identities and brands, and how I know that it might have a good reputation, but if they don't value their outward-facing side of things, then sometimes it's really hard to build that kind of trust and respect for what they do.
When I first started out, I was so busy with client work, kind of like that whole cobbler shoes, their cobbler doesn't make shoes for their family because they're always doing it for other people. I actually hired an outside phenomenal illustrator and designer, Von Glitchka. I don't know if any of you are familiar with him. He's one of the best illustrators and branders out there to do my original logo. I was just busy and I just felt like I couldn't click, so I was taking advice I give clients and hire somebody fantastic to do it. He did an amazing job, and I used it, and it was out there. And then one time I was at a conference, and I handed my card to someone, and they looked at it, and, oh, this is great. Did you do this? And I would never proclaim that I was the one who actually did it. I was happy to tell them, but for some reason, saying no at that point, just didn't feel right anymore. I had lost confidence in my own brand, or maybe I never had it because I didn't make it. So I dedicated the next 3 months to creating my current brand and kind of making it feel like it was me and my personality. And the minute I put that out there, my brand recognition, calls through my door, website, people, I got hired for speaking. All of a sudden, I think because I put my blood, sweat, and tears, my personality, I literally owned it, it blew my doors wide open and gave me a lot more recognition, because I think people, without even knowing that I actually did the new one or didn't do the old one, it was just this impact, you couldn't say it, it just was. It was me. And I've grown exponentially since that point. I can put a red dot on the calendar of just up since I did that simple little thing.
So that's actually a really great segue into how do you know when it's time to rebrand? And if you're a designer and someone who is kind of obsessive about design and the look and feel and experience, how do you know when it's time to step back and let it be? And Betty, I know you've been through a couple of rebrands just in the past couple of years, so you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I've gone through a couple different rebrands, I think 3 in the last year and a half. And it was just I was never satisfied with it. Either it was, it wasn't my vision. It was somebody that I had hired's vision, and they weren't seeing mine. And I wasn't proud of it when I would go to food shows or I'd go and meet with buyers. I wasn't really excited about showing them the product. I was excited about giving them product to taste, but I wasn't excited about showing it on the showing what they would see on the shelf. And I didn't see really people's eyes light up when they saw it. So I just felt it was kind of just blah. It just didn't stand out to me. It wasn't exciting. So I just was like, okay, we got to do it again. I mean, I rebranded last year after 4 months of having new packaging. I was just like, this isn't working. I don't like it. And some people thought I was being obsessive about it or just not being satisfied or, hard to please. But I was like, I'm not proud of it. And finally, it took a couple times, even with Lenny, of really narrowing what I wanted. I thought I wanted something that was all natural looking, and then he drew up some amazing logos in that direction, and I was like, no, that's just not me. I'm young. I want this to be happy and exciting, and all of this is feeling a bit not me. And so we just kept going, and I feel like at some points he was like, come on now, figure it out, figure out what you want. But then
not at all.
And the day that we actually started on this direction, it was just one font that he hadn't even designed a logo for. It was just a font, and I saw that font, and I was like, that's the direction I want to go. He was like, what? We just spent months designing these, and now you want to go this direction? I'm like, that's it. And so then he drew up this logo, and it was an immediate click. I said, that's happy, that's fresh, it's different. And with this packaging, it's something that I'm finally proud of, and I see people's face light up when they see it, whether it's a mom or a grandma or a kid. It's just something exciting that they enjoy looking at. Everybody picks up the box immediately and starts looking at it and making comments about it. And they're just enjoying themselves when they're reading it. And it's not so sterile and boring as a lot of packaging can be, especially in the gluten-free arena, because a lot of companies out there are just following the trend and slapping that gluten-free label. And it's plain, it's boring, the food doesn't even look good because it probably isn't. But we have an amazing product, and now we have amazing packaging, so now I'm finally satisfied. So no more rebranding for a while. And so I think that's when you know that you can step back is when you're happy with it.
For at least another year, right?
At least another year, yeah. Until we bring out more products, right?